When it comes to image quality, there is a big misconception that if you want better quality, you need more megapixels. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it isn't that straightforward. In this video, we're going to find out what really defines image quality.
Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Use coupon code CARL to get a 10% discount.
Over the years, camera manufacturers have dedicated much of their efforts to improve the number of megapixels in their latest models. At the start of the century, both Nikon and Canon were producing DSLRs with just 3 megapixels, a far cry from the 100 megapixel cameras we see today. This drive has led many to believe that megapixels are all that matters when it comes to image quality. But to better understand image quality, considering the number of megapixels alone isn't enough. You also need to look at the size and the type of sensor, understand how images are formed, how light is focused onto the sensor, and consider the pixel size to get the full picture. I like to use this graphic when considering image quality, as it defines the key elements that determine image quality: sensor size, photosite size, resolution, lens choice, file type, knowledge, and sensor type. Camera sensors and image quality. The type and size of the camera sensor has a large impact on image quality. There are 2 main types of camera sensors: CCD, which is charged coupled device, and CMOS, which is complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensors. Both of these essentially do the same job. They detect light and interpolate this information as an image. While CCD sensors used to be the most commonly used type of sensor, technological advancements combined with the lower manufacturing costs of CMOS sensors has changed this. Traditionally, CCD sensors produced higher quality and lower noise images than CMOS sensors when compared at the same low ISO, but used a lot more power. However, over the years, these differences have become a lot less marked. Although the type of sensor has less of an impact on image quality than it used to, sensor size or format is something that does have a significant impact. The 3 most common camera formats are APS-C or crop sensor, full frame for 35mm, and medium format. Crop sensor cameras are the smallest of the common sensor sizes, measuring approximately 23.5 by 15.6mm. Their smaller size, lighter weight, and lower price tag make them a popular choice amongst those just starting photography, and they are commonly used in both entry-level and mid-level cameras. These sensors are relatively new in terms of photography. Back in the days of film, crop sensor cameras didn't actually exist. The most common film formats were 35mm, medium format, and large format film. Crop sensor cameras only really came out of necessity for a cheaper alternative to 35mm sensors. And as technology continues to progress and the prices of sensors reduce, we may even see the disappearance of these smaller sensors altogether. Full-frame cameras are slightly larger than crop sensor cameras, with sensor sizes of about 36mm by 24mm. Larger and heavier than crop sensor cameras, they offer better image quality, perform better in low light conditions, and allow for greater depth of field control, but at a slightly higher price. The introduction of mirrorless cameras has also changed the game when it comes to size variations between crop sensor and full-frame cameras. Because they do not have a mirror system, mirrorless 35mm cameras are now basically the same physical body size as a crop sensor DSLR camera. This means you can have a higher quality image, but in a smaller, more lightweight camera body. Finally, medium format cameras with sensors of around 53.4 by 40mm offer the greatest image quality as well as greater resolution of the 3. However, this quality does come at a much higher price, which means they are often only used by professional photographers or those looking for the highest quality. There are, however, distinct differences even between medium format sensors. Not all medium format sensors are created equal. There are a number of medium format cameras on the market that don't strictly fit the dimensions of a medium format camera, such as the Leica S system, which has a sensor size of 30 by 45mm. Even medium format cameras from the same manufacturer don't always have the same medium format sensor size. For example, the Hasselblad X1D2 sensor measures 43.8mm by 32.9 compared to the 53.4 by 40mm sensor of the Hasselblad H6D100. This is often down to the amount of megapixels that need to be crammed into a physical space and will dictate what the acceptable physical dimensions need to be based on the photosite size. So why does the physical sensor size have an impact on image quality? To understand this, we need to understand how digital images are formed. The process of how digital images are formed is covered in our free Introduction to Photography course. But quite simply, an image is recorded when light passes through a lens and is recorded by the sensor. That sensor previously used to be film. Sensors are what allow digital cameras to record images. They're made up of millions of photosites, which are what record the information contained in individual pixels. Sensors record an image when the shutter button is pressed. This exposes the photosites to the incoming photons, light. That is then recorded as an electrical signal on the sensor. The strength of each of these signals is converted to digital values that essentially produce the image once the exposure has ended. Each photosite, due to a filter placed over the top, is only able to capture one of three primary colours: red, green or blue. The most common of these filter systems is called a Bayer array. This array, invented in 1974 by Bruce Bayer, consists of alternating rows of red-green and green-blue filters. This deliberate decision by Bayer was based on the science of human visual perception. Human eyes are more sensitive to green light than red or blue, so his Bayer array comprises of 50% green filters, 25% red filters and 25% blue. As each photosite is only able to record one colour, certain colour data is lost when initially capturing the image, so a process called demosaicing is required to convert the array of primary colours into the final photo. This is done using certain mathematical algorithms, and it is these algorithms that result in the different colour representation of the various camera brands, and is ultimately what dictates why a Hasselblad colour rendition may be different from Phase 1, for example. One of the reasons I shoot Hasselblad is because I've found that their natural colour rendition processing to be the best I've seen from any digital camera. In addition to Bayer array filter systems, Fuji created a different, more random array called an X-trans sensor. This randomized pattern uses a 6x6 random filtration method and is better at reducing interference patterns associated with moire, especially on smaller sensors, partly because it doesn't require a low pass filter that the Bayer 2x2 array needs, and whilst theoretically an X-trans sensor can record more resolution, it does have drawbacks in other areas such as software support and flare-lit situations. Interestingly, Fuji must only consider this sensor design advantageous on smaller sensors because Fuji still choose to use the conventional Bayer array filters on their medium format sensors. Although it's worth mentioning that Fuji, Nikon, Phase and Hasselblad all use sensors designed and manufactured by Sony, whilst Canon still produce their own sensors. But as mentioned earlier, two camera brands can use the same sensors, but their expertise, processing algorithms and lens design can lead to vastly different looks of the final output image. Other things worth mentioning in sensor design is back illuminated sensors, where the metal wiring is positioned below the photodiode substrate, meaning an increase in light capturing ability. But this itself has required a few other technical problems to be overcome. Back illuminated sensors are commonly seen in Sony cameras, where the first full-frame version was introduced on the 42 megapixel Sony a7R II. And they are now branded as Exmor sensors, which they claim are twice as sensitive to light as conventional front illuminated sensors. Common in all sensors now for the last 10 years is micro lens arrays, which are essentially tiny lenses over each photosite that funnel and direct the light more effectively to the sensor photosites. This increased light gathering ability meant that photosites could become smaller, but this unfortunately also increases the opportunity for diffraction to happen earlier when closing the aperture of the lens down. Images shot at small apertures such as f/16, f/22 and f/32 will have a reduction in sharpness and contrast due to diffraction. This, unfortunately, can only be overcome by using larger photosites and better lens design. In my opinion, and hopefully if Sony are listening, I'd prefer you to ditch the 100 megapixel medium format sensor in favour of around 80 megapixels in a 50 by 40 millimeter dimension with a photosite size of around 6 micrometers or microns, thereby combining the best combination in resolution and photosite size for better low light performance and reducing diffraction. And while you're at it, make it a back illuminated sensor design too. Unfortunately though, many of the manufacturers went off on a megapixel quest as a marketing opportunity rather than an image quality quest, which is of course what it should have been. Image quality, megapixels versus resolution. Many photographers fall into the trap of believing more megapixels equal better quality. And while more megapixels do technically equate to higher resolution, it does not necessarily mean better image quality or higher resolution. The word resolution, after all, is derived from the word resolve, and resolving ability, which we will explore further. Megapixels are made up of millions of pixels. These pixels contain specific color information that make up the image. Often used interchangeably with megapixels, the term resolution does not simply refer to the number of megapixels in an image. More accurately, it refers to how clearly the medium can capture and record detail. This is particularly important when it comes to printing images. This can be influenced by factors such as lens and sensor quality, file type and ISO. Often as important as the number of pixels is the size of the pixels themselves. Measured in microns, which is determined by the size of the sensor, this is because you can only fit a specific number of pixels in a given area, photosite sizes can range from as small as 1.1 microns in a smaller smartphone sensor to 8.4 microns in other larger formats. Larger photosites can record much better dynamic range, which gives a better transitional tonal value, greater tonal accuracy, and better color accuracy. For example, the image quality of a 50 megapixel camera phone will be far less than that of a 50 megapixel medium format camera. This is because the photosites on the smartphone sensor will be much smaller than those of the medium format larger sensor, which means that the smartphone sensor's ability to capture and record light is far less. Think of it this way: a larger bucket will catch more rain than a smaller bucket. Calculating megapixels and pixel size. Megapixels can be calculated by multiplying the dimensions in pixels of a sensor and dividing that number by 1 million. For example, an image with a resolution of 5472 by 3648 would produce about 20 megapixel image. 5472 times 3648 equals 19,961,856. Divide that by 1000 and we equal 19.96, or call it 20 megapixels. Individual pixel size can be calculated by taking the width of the sensor in millimeters divided by the image width in pixels and multiplying by 1000. For example, a camera with 5616 by 3744 pixels and a 36 by 24 mm full frame sensor would have 6.4 micron pixels. This is calculated by 36 divided by 5,616 and then multiplying by 1,000 equals 6.4 microns. Other factors that influence image quality. While sensor types and size, megapixel count and pixel size are all important when it comes to image quality, there are other often overlooked factors such as lens choice, file type, and the setting combinations used to capture the image that also have an impact. Depending on which lens you're using, the quality of an image can vary greatly, even when using the same camera. An image shot with an older model lens will result in a lower resolution image than the same image shot with a newer model lens with better optical design, even though the same number of megapixels will be recorded, because it's the same camera. The newer lens design will likely have better contrast, color accuracy and sharpness, resulting in better resolution. One of the most important things to consider when it comes to lens choice is the actual quality of the lens. Chromatic aberration is one factor that you should pay particular attention to. A common optical problem in lower quality lenses that results in color fringing along high contrast edges. Chromatic aberration is a result of dispersion when wavelengths of color are focused at different positions on the focal plane. Or, in simpler terms, when a lens fails to focus wavelengths of color to the same point. Regardless of how many megapixels there are in an image, if a lens is poor quality, this will always result in a lower quality image when compared to a lens that does not result in chromatic aberration or other optical faults. A second factor to consider is diffraction, which can result in reduced sharpness in an image. This is a result of light rays passing through a small opening such as the aperture. If the opening is too small, or if the photosite is too small, it causes the rays to overlap and interfere with each other. This interference means light is added in some places and reduced in others. When the rays of light hit the sensor, they create a pattern known as the airy disk, which basically describes the best focus spot of light. If the focus spots of light are too close, it becomes impossible to resolve the individual patterns, causing a loss of sharpness and image quality. File type: JPEG versus RAW. The file format you choose to shoot in will have a big impact on how much information can be stored in an image. Although both file types contain the same number of pixels, RAW images store far more information within those pixels than JPEG images. You could think of it as hidden data which can be extrapolated from the RAW file to produce better quality images, whereas a JPEG compresses the data and there is less available to process. Photographic knowledge. Another factor that influences image quality is knowledge. Only if you understand how cameras work, how to correctly expose an image, where to focus, what lenses, equipment and setting combinations to use, and how to correctly light images to compensate for dynamic range, will you then be able to create the highest quality images. Dynamic range refers to the number of steps between the blackest blacks and the whitest whites in an image. Each camera, and even the different recording mediums, has its own dynamic range, although the ultimate goal is to have the maximum range of tones in between the black and white values. Your camera settings also play a role in image quality, particularly the aperture. Using small apertures like f/22 will enhance the diffraction problem that I mentioned earlier, and will result in small details in the image to be lost, causing a softer looking image. Understanding the bigger picture. As you can see from the points discussed before, image quality does not just depend on the number of megapixels in an image. Even though this perception may be perpetuated by camera manufacturers, please don't be fooled. Although megapixels play a role in overall image quality, they are not the be-all and end-all. Instead, try to think of image quality as circular, with each of the points discussed working together to give the final result. My camera, sensor and lens choices always take all of these things into consideration so that I can produce the highest quality images possible. So next time you're trying to determine the expected image quality of a given camera, remember to keep in mind each of the points discussed here. Well, I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much for watching.
This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Carl to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.